2, 1. Perfect. Okay, so now we are recording. We'll let a few more folks that are in the waiting room hop in here. I'll keep the Zoom items up on here, and then at the top of the hour, we can go ahead and get started. Thank you again for everyone who is joining in right now. This is the AcreValue webinar. It is currently about a minute before start time. We'll go ahead and start the call momentarily here. Alrighty, and seeing as it just turned to 11, let's go ahead and get started. I'd like to be the first to welcome you here to the AcreValue webinar. AcreValue 101, what can I accomplish with AcreValue? Good morning, and thank you for joining us again on our call today. My name is Jeff Nizuka. I will be your host and presenter here. I'm the lead account executive here at AcreValue. And today we'll be covering how folks are using AcreValue for their own personal research or for their professional business as well. Now, specifically, we'll start by talking about just what is AcreValue, as well as the data sets and the information that you can find on AcreValue. Then we'll spend most of the conversation talking about how folks use AcreValue for their specific goals or research. And then we'll end the discussion with directions on how to get started. And like I mentioned before, we'll have a Q&A session towards the end as well. Stick around until the end, as we do have a free trial coupon for you, for our consumers who are on the webinar here, because you attended. So as a thank you, we'd like to extend that over to you. Again, stick around till the end. Now, let's go ahead and get started. And I see quite a few folks who are joining us. So again, thank you there. Given that we do have a lot of folks from a lot of different backgrounds, and many of you signed up at different points over the last few years, I think it's probably helpful to start the conversation here today by setting the tone of what is AcreValue, right? So AcreValue is the gold standard in land research software. And the way that AcreValue works is that it pulls together many different data sets so you can research land, contact landowners, and determine land values as fast as possible. Currently, we've got over 1 million users. That includes you, the folks who are with us today. So thanks for being thanks for being here, and thanks for being part of the AcreValue community. Generally, we see around 500,000 visitors on the website every month, a good portion of whom are not just using this for curiosity, but actually using AcreValue on the day-to-day for their businesses as well. And we can cover some of those use cases later. We do cover over 3,000 counties in the lower 48 states. So if you do have any questions specific to where you're located or potentially where you might be interested in, we do have a Q&A session later in the webinar. Let's talk about it. Now, I mentioned that AcreValue helps speeds up research by pulling together many different data sets. So let's talk about those. What is the data that's on AcreValue? Why is it helpful? And to summarize that information, let's talk about the data that is here. I would lay out the 4 main pillars of AcreValue something like this. So number 1, you can see the landowner profile. So that includes the landowner's name and contact information, including potential phone numbers and email addresses. You can also see comparable sales, which are recent transactions of sold land. For a little bit of background here, in real estate, appraisers and realtors use like-kind properties to determine land values for their clients. So being able to see recent transactions will give you a solid estimate of current land values. AcreValue's comparable sales, those feed in weekly from county records. And a unique part of our comparable sales records is also being able to see whether there was a mortgage for the transaction or whether it was a cash purchase. That's going to be helpful to know when talking to the landowner. You can also see land characteristics. So that includes things like crop history, flood hazard, soil maps, and the brand new elevation and topography maps that were added to AcreValue earlier this week. We're very excited about those. You can also see local energy infrastructure as well, including nearby transmission lines, substations, wind turbines, solar farms, and more, as well as ownership information, status, and other relevant info for each. I've seen this become a much more relevant conversation recently, as folks are becoming more aware of other opportunities for highest and best use case for their land. And one thing to note here, the government has now shut off new access to the substation dataset, which means that AcreValue is one of the only places to go find that information. So we just covered the 4 main pillars of data on AcreValue. Now let's talk about putting that information into action, into practice, right? What does that look like? And so for the folks who use AcreValue, for our consumer audience who might be using AcreValue for their own properties or maybe for curiosity, we found that most folks are doing some of the following on AcreValue. And it starts with, for folks who are interested in purchasing new land, AcreValue will help by presenting you with a map of parcels and local landowners, as well as active for sale properties. You can then use AcreValue to research those land prices using the comparable sales that we just talked about. Or you can also use AcreValue to find a local real estate expert or financing solutions. And for folks who want to find new land to rent, the process is pretty similar as well. Search through a map of parcels and landowners, either local or potentially out-of-state landowners as well. Then use AcreValue to research land values, get in touch with the landowner to start a conversation and propose a rental. Now, in terms of managing your property, we also see current landowners visit AcreValue frequently to manage their own properties. Primarily, this involves staying up to date with local land values and how those might impact your decision to sell or hold. Landowners also visit AcreValue quite a bit to connect with other landowners. Potentially, you might have your neighbors nearby or potential renters, as well as finding and printing property maps for their properties. On the topic of staying in touch with neighbors, on the topic of staying in touch with local land values, I will say AcreValue also puts out periodic reports on what's happening in terms of regional and state level land markets. So definitely check those out on the website when you get a chance. And finally, for folks who are looking to potentially sell a property, AcreValue is a great way to quickly estimate the land values and then prepare all of the research needed to list a property. And if you're in the market to buy or sell, I will note we have a nationwide network of real estate agents and local experts who are in our network. So reach out to us and we'd be happy to connect you with one of them as well. Now, we just covered the main ways that our consumer audience is using AcreValue. Now, what about our professional users, right? We're grateful that AcreValue is the main avenue for folks in the industry to quickly find data and finish their research. And because of that, we've been able to have conversations with folks from many different professional industries around land. That includes real estate, that includes finance, investment, energy, and more. And for all of these folks, a common thread is that AcreValue is providing them with consistent and reliable access to better data and the tools needed to shorten that research cycle and put reports in front of clients or customers quicker and more professionally. Given these different use cases that I've just covered, now let's jump into the AcreValue software and we'll start by taking a look at the data that is there as we covered in the earlier stages of this presentation. And then we can dive into a few different use cases as well. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to switch over to the AcreValue website. And so what we'll see here is, a map of the AcreValue site. And as you zoom into the AcreValue map, what we'll start to see is parcel boundaries near the surface, right? And so as I move my cursor around, you can see those parcel boundaries appear. This is going to be one of your first places to interact with the data that is on AcreValue. So let's start with clicking on a parcel and take a look at the data that is there. And then I'll explain how this can be useful, right? So let's click on this parcel and we'll see the data that is here in the sidebar. Starting with, as soon as you click a parcel, you get information about that parcel, including who is the owner, how do I get in touch with them? If I want to try and find phone numbers and email addresses, you can search for those here as well. We'll also tell you summary information about the parcel itself. So things like how many acres is it? Tell me about the soil quality, what crops were grown here recently. You know, was it corn? Was it tillable ground? Or was it potentially grass and pasture land? Tell me about the slope and the flood risk. And the nice thing here about AcreValue is because we are fundamentally map-based, again, it means that we are able to provide maps to you for these properties, not just summary records. And so as I select Get Full Report, what we'll see here is we'll see a report pop up of the information that is underneath this particular parcel here. We'll start to see here is my subject property that I just selected. And then, like I mentioned, we have the all new elevation maps that are on AcreValue, which is phenomenal. We'll also be able to see things like soil survey, flood hazard, crop history, and more for a property. So all of this information, as I click through the first property report, you get all of this information basically at your fingertips. I mean, it really only took 1 or 2 clicks to get into all of this information that's provided back to you. And now let's relate this back to certain use cases, right? So I think the first goal, if we think about focusing on one, is one that's applicable to most folks, right? Which is I want to understand this property, but I want to understand it in the context of what is this property worth in today's market? How can I quantify that, right? All of this information is going to be helpful in providing you with characteristics about the land. This all goes into quantifying how much could this property be worth. Now, one thing that's also going to be important in terms of the property reports here and what AcreValue provides is what we covered earlier, sales comparables. Where is that data? How can I get there? And the nice thing is that as soon as you generate a property report, we're looking at a property report here, we will also be able to provide you with comparable sales for the property that you just selected. Again, going back to the presentation, what this represents is sale records of recent properties from the nearby area. And these will help you determine what the potential land values for the property I'm interested in. And that essentially means let's take a look at when these properties sold, right? These are from recently as a couple months ago. And let's take a look at how much they sold for. And using that primary information, as well as some of the other maps and other information about the sales, we can start to estimate what a value is going to be for this particular property. What you saw me do was you saw me get from, I have a subject in mind. Now let's get all the way to, I have maps for my property. I have a potential land value to present back to the landowner if I'm looking to purchase, or potentially if I'm a seller, this is the land value that I should shoot for in negotiations. This resource is phenomenal and it'll be saved to your account. I also want to mention that you can print this report as well. And so for our professional audience out there, printing the report has been a very big deal to make sure that you can not only get the research done, but also present it to your clients in a way that's easy to understand and is helpful as well. So let's talk about that. Up in the top right-hand corner, you have the ability to hit download, configure your report, and then download or print or share it in a PDF format. And so let's take a look at that report here. I've got it queued up. We can quickly zoom through this report and take a look at some of the information that is here. Again, this PDF version is representing all of the same information that you just saw on my digital report, right? That means I have the same comparable sales here. I've got the same maps underneath them. This is more so about how can I take the research from AcreValue and present it back to the people who need to be able to see this. So let's continue to scroll through here. I've got the elevation maps. Like I mentioned, we had just uploaded those earlier this week, so very excited to present that to folks. We've got soil maps here as well. Flood hazard, this is going to be very important for understanding where you can do certain things like potentially develop energy infrastructure or really, I mean, what is going to be tillable land for you as well. And then we'll be able to tell you crop histories as well. In addition to current ownership, aerial information, this report is pretty chock full of information that's going to be helpful for your property here. So let's pause again. We just covered from start to finish the ability to estimate a property's land value, print out that relevant land characteristics map as well. You know, we have this in the printable version. Now let's talk about the process of maybe how to find owners nearby, as well as how to search for properties that fit my search criteria, right? Let's say I'm in the market, I want to try and purchase some land. How do I go about finding those properties, and how do I go about potentially contacting landowners as well, right? And this will be relevant for the folks who are not only thinking of buying, but also thinking of renting new land as well. So let's go through that. I'm going to flip over to the land sales tab here, and let's take a look at the properties that are nearby. So I'm zoomed into, in this case, it's McLean County, Illinois. I've got a property map up. There are lots of parcels in the area, and as I move my mouse around, you can actually see that I have all of the owners that are here. But this is all of the parcels, right? So let's think about, if I have a very specific criteria for the parcels that I want to go find, how do I do that? And so one of the things that's on AcreValue here is the ability to say, for the data and information that's on the map currently, I want to be able to filter that out given certain characteristics so that only certain parcels come back. And so what you'll see me do here in a moment is to say, I can use some of the filters above the map, as well as there's a section for more filters here to be able to say, let's only find properties that fit certain criteria. So again, I have Illinois, McLean County saved here. I've got options to enter in a parcel number or owner name if I want to search for parcels that way. But in the case of, I'm in the market to potentially buy, I don't really know who the owner is just yet. I'm more so looking at properties that fit certain characteristics like acreage. If I have a designated acreage for properties that I want to go find, we can drop that in here. Let's say, something between 40 to 60 acres. And if I'm a grower, maybe I'm looking for tillable land, right? So that means being able to do things like I'm going to select land use. It's got to be cropland properties. Let's say, for example, maybe we can also put in soil productivity. So PI values, we're in Illinois, so that would be relevant. Let's set a minimum for that. And once I set my filters, we can apply them, and the system will come back and say, out of all of the parcels that are in the system, here are the ones that fit your criteria. These are going to be the people to get in touch with, right? Instead of looking at all the parcels in the system, these are the ones that fit your specific criteria in terms of what's relevant for your search. And it looks like there's 12 of them on the map here out of a potential 1,000, over 1,000 parcels in this county that fit these criteria. And as I see them on the map, I can do things like click into each of them where I can see the owner, I can see their address. I can also try and find phone numbers and email addresses for them. And I can also open up a list as well, which will allow me to view all of the parcels and their information kind of seamlessly. So you'll see me do that in a moment. And I can understand, for these properties that are on my map here are all of the owners. Here's how I get in touch with them in terms of the public tax address. If I want to try and find phone numbers and emails, I can do that through here as well. Finally, I will note there are some professional and enterprise level folks that are on the system here. I will note one of the most recent search criteria that has been relevant to people is being able to say, well, does my property have any sort of energy infrastructure, things like transmission lines, substations? And this is going back to the conversation that I had referenced earlier around best use case and knowing how to get the best out of your land. So I will quickly flip over to another tab here that shows an example of cropland in McLean County that is nearby to a transmission line. So specifically, I have my filter set up so that only properties that are within a mile from the transmission line show up. And it's actually a very cool visual here. We can see that out of the county, there are several different transmission lines that, in the eastern half of the county, they run east-west here. There's also a few that run towards the northeast of the county. And for those parcels that are nearby to the transmission line between 40 and 60 acres and are mostly cropland, here are the ones that you need to reach out to. The same way that you saw me do earlier, you can open up a list for all of these parcels. That's going to get you to how do I get in touch with these people as fast as I can? How do I understand information about the property? And fundamentally, how do I then get in touch with them to put an offer in or to have a conversation about their land? Now, there are many, many use cases on AcreValue, like I mentioned earlier. We only have time for a couple of them here. We've covered a few of the main use cases, primarily finding land values on AcreValue, as well as figuring out who are the owners of a property and how do I get in touch with them. There are many other use cases, so let's make sure to explain how to get started on AcreValue. And if you have a specific goal or a use case in mind that you want to achieve, let us know in the Q&A section or send me an email and I'd be happy to walk you through it as well. So let's flip back over to the slide deck. And let's cover how to get started. This is going to be important, right? So for our consumers, we do have a subscription that you can purchase online. And because you've stayed until the end of the webinar, again, we're happy to offer that free 1-month trial of the subscription so you can explore the site and do some of the things I was showing earlier. Again, if you have a use case that wasn't covered in this webinar, feel free to email me or put it in the Q&A session and we'd be happy to cover it, explain a little bit more details or potentially pull it up on the screen to walk through as well. Go ahead and scan the QR code in the bottom right of the slide here. That's going to give you access to the free 1-month trial. It'll take you to the checkout page with the coupon applied. Please note that the trial subscription will automatically renew at full price after the trial is over. So just keep that in mind. Cancel before the renewal to avoid any charges. I will leave this up here for a quick moment to make sure everyone has a chance to scan this if you're interested. I will also come back to this slide later on as well. So if you want to consider it for a second and then come back to scan it, we can do that as well. Now, for our business customers, let's move over to the next slide. We have commercial pricing structures available, so feel free to reach me via phone or email, and I'm happy to start the discussion about getting your team or company set up on AcreValue. My contact information will be provided again at the end of the webinar here today, and I know we've got a lot of content that we've covered, and I know that there are a lot of questions to be answered as well. So let's move into the Q&A session here. I will also keep the QR code on the screen so that the folks who are interested in picking up the free trial 1 month for AcreValue's consumer subscription have a chance to do so. So let's move into the Q&A session. I'm going to take a look through the chat line to see what kind of questions are here. My co-host Don has been curating the questions that do come in as well. So Don, if you have any questions that you do see here that we should answer for the group, feel free to let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to go through questions one by one and we can knock those off as they come up.
The one question that came up was, are the mineral rights included in ownership details? So.
Good question. Yep. Thank you for the question to the folks who requested that. So on AcreValue, the mineral rights, unfortunately, are not included. We focus on surface level ownership here. And so using AcreValue, you can search through who the surface owners are and get in touch with those folks.
And then the next question here is someone's asking how to search for farms using AcreValue. Currently, they're using Zillow and Redfin.
Sure, great. That's a main use case here, how to find farms for sale using AcreValue. That's perfect. So for that, I may actually jump back into the site here and we can display this on the screen. So going back to what AcreValue is a collection of the farms that are in the US, as well as who owns them, and also some other information about each property, including things like, soil classification, things like elevation, slope, flood hazard. I think the main thing to answer about how to find farms for sale are Once you get a sense of where the farm is that you're looking for, as well as how large it might be, that sort of thing, you can come into AcreValue. And the idea here is let's search through all of the parcels that exist to try and find ones that are farms, specifically that fit your criteria, right? On this particular example here, I've got Illinois, I've got McLean County selected. That's the area that I'm searching in. And then I'm searching for properties that are between 40 and 60 acres, as you can see on my screen here. I've got a filter set up for 40 and 60 acres, and I've also got another filter here for cropland specifically. I do have a transmission line filter here as well. If I remove that, we'll get a lot more results that come back, as there are lots of other parcels of cropland in McLean County that aren't necessarily nearby the transmission lines. What this is going to do is this is essentially going to give you a list of here are all of the parcels, right, that are cropland that fit 40 to 60 acre parcel searches. And in terms of how to get in touch with them, then we can see who the owners are in the sidebar here. We can get in touch with them via their tax address. We can get in touch with them via potential phone and email addresses, which you can find here. And also we'll be able to provide things like a valuation, either via our in-house valuation estimate, or as I mentioned before, let's go find comparable sales for this property by selecting the property, generating a full report, and that's going to give me an estimate of land values in the area as well. Now let's let this report generate in, and I will tie the conversation off here. For this particular property, let's see what kind of sale comps come back here. This is a gut sense of, what is relevant nearby in terms of properties that have sold recently, and how can that get me an estimate to what I should be paying for in terms of my property here if I'm searching for farms that I want to potentially purchase. I will also note on AcreValue, we have a dedicated section for active land listings as well. So that you can find up at the top navigation bar here on the website. There's a portion for land listings that'll take you to land for sale. These are listings that have been posted by brokerages and by realtors specifically on our website. So these are brokerages and realtors that use AcreValue and have decided to post their listings up on here as well. These are active listings. And so if these are one of the properties that you'd be curious about, I'd recommend getting in touch with the listed agent or the broker here, and they'd be able to get you more information about these listings that are here. On this page, you're more than welcome to zoom into a particular area and say, there's lots of listings here. Let's click on a few of them. Or you can also use the sidebar to do things like filter for specific listings that are only going to fit my criteria, such as, again, I need it to be a certain acreage threshold. I need it to be in a certain location by state and county. And there's a few other filters there that you can use as well. That's a great question. I will pause there. Hopefully I was able to give you some context there. There's a few other suggestions that I might have in terms of going to find farms to purchase. So hopefully that gives you a good sense of a couple of ways and gives you enough to get started. Let's see, maybe we have time for a couple more questions here. Don, can you let me know of another question?
Can you a search be saved for future reference?
Can searches be saved for future reference? Yep, great question here. So currently the way to do that is if I generate a report, I will have done my search criteria in the map, right? To be able to say acreage, PI, cropland, that sort of thing. If you generate a report off of this search and then go back after you generate your report, the search will be saved. In terms of searching these particular criteria to then kind of just queue up again, that's something that's in the works. We have heard that as a request before. I don't really have an update on the timelines for something like that, but I do know that our development team is figuring out the best way to implement that in the system to say, I know that these are going to be my primary searches and I need to do these lots of times. How can I queue this up so I don't have to fill in the information here? So we don't currently have that feature, but I do know that it is something that has been discussed. For now, if you do run a search, generate a report, and then go back to your previous search using this back button at the top left corner of the AcreValue site, the search will stay there. So at the very least, it will be populated. So as you see me go back, I will have the searches right here. That's a good question. I think we have time for a couple more questions as well.
The one that Brian sent just now, what kind of support do you provide new subscribers?
Yeah, great question. So for our consumers, you're more than welcome to email us at support@acrevalue.com. I will also present my contact information here to, make sure that people know how to get in touch with me. For our enterprise subscribers and the professionals, we do offer a little bit more in terms of training, such as things like dedicated calls, dedicated onboarding sessions with the team to make sure that people feel comfortable with the system. We do also have a dedicated line there to where you can reach out to us and we'll be able to answer questions, as well as, if there's other ways that you want to be able to use AcreValue, we can have a support person get in touch with you and try and work through that process there as well. So in general, to summarize, I would say all users of AcreValue are more than welcome to reach out to our general support line. And then for enterprise users on the commercial side, we have a couple extra solutions there as well. We may have time for one more question. And again, thank you to all of the attendees for asking these wonderful questions. I know there are a lot. As I mentioned beforehand, we will try and cover as much as possible here. If you if your question hasn't been answered, we'll try and follow up via email as well to at least get in touch and try and surface that question, provide you with some details here. So maybe we have time for one more. I will also flip back to the presentation screen here to make sure that anyone who wants to claim the free trial has a chance to claim it. Let's take a look at one more question here. Don?
Here's a quick one. Where do you source the soil and topo maps, topography maps, and maybe the FEMA information too might be good.
Okay, great question. Yes. So depending on what information it is, we'd source it from different locations. Generally, in particular for soil, soils are coming from the US government data set run by NRCS. It's called Surgo. So we're able to pull in soil maps from there. In terms of the elevation, I believe we have a elevation DEM service from USGS as well. And then finally, like Don mentioned, the flood maps, those are coming from FEMA. And then in terms of the crop history, those are coming from USDA National Ag Statistics Service. So in summary, I would say the different data sets that are on AcreValue to tell you more about land characteristics, a lot of those data sets come from publicly accessible government data sets that we've been able to loop in together to make it a little bit easier to actually see them. They're not very easy to access right now in current state if you go to the government website. So our value added is definitely to make it a little bit more accessible. It is past the 30 minutes here. To the extent that we can, we'll try and stay on for maybe one more question. I did promise I will pull up my contact info. So if you do have any other questions, feel free to reach me at this line. I'm more than happy to provide my 2 cents on what you're looking to accomplish, as well as any other solutions that might be helpful for you or other ways that we can improve the platform. Those kinds of comments are always appreciated. So if you do have time and you do have a question or request, feel free to send it over my way, and I'm happy to spend some time on it. Given that it is around just over the time here, I will, semi-officially say again to the folks who are still left here, thank you for being on our webinar this morning. It was a great having you here. I appreciate the time that you've all spent with us. Thank you for your interest in AcreValue, and hope I can see some of you on AcreValue here in the near future. If you do have questions, again, feel free to reach out to me. And without further ado, I will put the QR code back on the screen here. If you would like to pick up a subscription. That will conclude most of the content. If I have time for one more question, we'll try and handle a quick one. Again, thank you for joining. And finally, a recording will be sent out as soon as our video team has a chance to process this. Thank you again. Don, is there one short question?
Yep. Someone asked if there's an expiration data code. I didn't think that there was, but
Gotcha. Yeah, expiration
The
date on the
coupon
code. That's a
comes.
good question. So
Yeah.
technically there's no expiration date for now. So feel free to use this. If now is not the right time for you, but you want to be able to check out AcreValue in the future, feel free to reach this. The codes may change, so I wouldn't say there's never an expiration date, but to the extent that there is no hard set expiration on this one, there is not. So feel free to use it. I would recommend picking it up as soon as possible, again, because codes may change in the future.
And I think I got all of the questions copied, so we can send some of those through email too with replies if we missed any questions.
Perfect. Alrighty, folks. Well, then at this point, I will say thank you again for joining. It was a pleasure having everyone here. Thank you again for being so active with the questions. That always makes these presentations go a lot better. So much appreciated. We'll be sending out a recording when we have it ready for you. Otherwise, have a great rest of your day, and thank you for considering AcreValue.